How you doing, everybody? For as long as I've been in nutrition in the field of health sciences, the debate has raged on about what's more important, what creates best outcomes, what's the best way to deliver nutrition goals or nutrition information or to set up programs for the average individual. And if you looked at the data is a little bit conflicting here too. So you have a war of two different sides essentially that argue from two different perspectives of how to help the same individual. And I want to break that down in this video. So macro dieting, just the short of it, essentially you have your essential macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats. I would argue also fiber and alcohol, but that's another day. Protein, carbs, and fats. And as long as you hit the daily numbers for those macros that you have set, and you follow that efficiently, you should get the outcome desired or set out for. Then there's a whole other camp, right? That's more the functional health camp. This would be more holistic health coaching. This would be more of some of the dietetics realm, more of like the medical field, little less fitness and performance nutrition, little less physique enhancement, bodybuilding, and again, more health and wellness. And this we're gonna call the functional dieting group. Now, this camp is more about what you're eating, how you're eating, when you're eating, those components that are involved inside of a plan. Usually functional dieting is a little bit more encapsulated in finite types of foods you should eat. Macroing says you can eat whatever you want. Functional dieting usually gives you servings or gives you the exact diet plans or tell you the exact categories of food you can eat. And so it's like two different warring strategies to gain similar outcomes. And they both have their arguments. And again, if you look at the data, it is conflicting. Much of the data on macro dieting shows that if you reduce macros and you reduce calories over time, a person can get the same amount of success, whether they eat all their food in one meal or they diversify it out into small meals throughout the day. Then there's other data that shows that if you don't watch your glycemic index, if you don't eat small meals throughout the day, if you don't watch your nutrient timing, meaning when you eat your food, maybe around activity or in the morning or before bed, that has one of the biggest impacts on your health outcomes and your weight loss outcomes. And so again, you've got these two different worlds and the data is conflicting. And so that's why you have people so entrenched in their camp. I know many people that are in the macro community that say, if it fits your macros, eat whatever you want, doesn't matter when, how, whatever. It could be one meal, it could be 17 meals, doesn't matter. Hit those numbers and you're gonna be good to go. And to a certain point, that would be true. Yes, I mean, if you hit your total calories for the day and you hit your generalized macros, again, total calories is probably one of the biggest components here to this as well. Although they're not counting calories, but by giving macros, you're ascertaining a really close caloric value, whether you're giving the calories or not. Functional dieting is, again, can give you, it sometimes is exact calories, but it's looking at servings, it's looking at types of foods, and it's a little less concerned with the exact macros. So you see how the components can shift. And as someone who's been an expert in both of these areas and looked at the challenges that each type of dieting faces, and then looked back at the research and says, why is it that I see that both of these are right, but both of these are wrong? How could that be true? And it all comes back to population. And this is what happens with research all the time. We see one piece of research that says one thing, and we assume that you can apply that to every type of person in every population at any time for any reason. That's the ignorance on the reader's part, but both camps do this religiously. Again, if I had to group these people, you're looking at fitness, bodybuilding, physique enhancement, nutrition, fundamental workout nutrition, versus holistic health coaching, dietetics, which even dietetics might even just be calories, which I wouldn't even count that. We don't do calories. And I'm not even talking about calories as its own diet strategy here. I don't like that method at all. These are the two preferable methods, but calories do become more involved because macros are not counting them, right? Again, serving, so you're dealing with more medical-based care. And therein lies the difference in the population. So let me help you with this. This will bring it into play. So this goes for coaches and this goes for individuals. We're going to go ahead and we're going to draw two people. You're going to love my handwriting here because I'm so good at this. Right, my stick figures, okay? And there we go. So we've got, we've got two people here. We'll give them a name. We'll say Sally here, and we've got Joe over here. There's two really common names, right? Okay, and so Sally and Joe, you could say, okay, well, according to majority of research, if Sally and Joe follow a set of macros, let's say I give each one of them a set of macros as 20% protein, and you can do percentages or actually grams, maybe say that's like 160p, and then 50% carb, and then 30% fat, and then you could diversify that out. I think that comes right around, I don't know, like 280c, and then, somewhere in the neighborhood in relationship to like 55 fat, maybe even a little bit more, and exact macros, right? Okay, so I've got that. But how this applies to each person, like how their body is going to utilize that, really dictates on other factors that describe the population that they're in. And so if I had to give you a continuum, and that's what I'm going to try to do to decide which one we're talking to when we're talking diet systems. So I think the factors that are involved, one is going to be, and I think I'm going to write it down here, is going to be age. Okay. 2 is going to be gender. Okay. 3 is going to be number, we'll say level of inflammation. 4 can be, I'd say, pounds of muscle, for sure. I think the next one's going to be type of training often. And last would be, goals. What are the goals? And I think these factors, depending on which side you fall on these factors, really dictate what kind of program is going to be best for that individual, okay? So let me give you an example here. If the younger that you are, okay, so we're going to say this is the macro camp here, and this is the functional camp. So the younger that you get, the more basic macros are going to work because your body's more fuel efficient. Okay? If you're a male, I think macros tend to work better because you end up, there's a few features. Males tend to stay more metabolically stable, and you can get away with more things that wouldn't be necessarily encompassed in a macro program that would be in a functional program. Not that in macro programming you cannot take into account a woman's hormonal balance. It's just a little harder to do from a macro perspective versus a functional perspective, okay? Where you're controlling the diet, the types of foods, are there cruciferous veggies? Again, you can still do some of this in macroing. I'm just talking in generals. Level of inflammation. The higher the level of inflammation, the more disease that they have, the more the body's going to be unable to break down macros at any time of any amount efficiently. So the more inflammation, the more you're going to interrupt the natural process of the body. Think of a body like a machine, and the more things that you throw into the machine to make it less efficient, the less you can just give it numbers like a machine and it do exactly what it's supposed to do, which is kind of what macroing is implying. So level of inflammation, again, if it's high, that's going to matter. The more muscular you are, okay, the more muscular you are, the more you can get away. You're more usually insulin sensitive. You can usually get away with a lot more, and you can eat your food at any time and any amount and any type of food, taking into account glycemic index, which I will get into the components of a functional dieting in the next video, okay? So more muscle would go to macros. Type of training, this is important too. If you're training like a professional athlete 5 or 6 days a week, and you're really, again, maybe you're in sports, and that is the major component of your programming, again, you're probably going to lean more towards macroing, because again, when you're really training hard, you're doing a lot of the right things to your body, and you're really pushing the body to increase its ability or increase its muscle. You usually get better metabolic activity from the system, so you can usually lean on macros. It tends to work a little bit better. Not that a lot of things, the more that you train, become functionally conditional in terms of nutrients, minerals, things like that, but I find overall, if you had to lean one direction, if you were doing more, if it was more about yoga, less walking, a lower intensity things that aren't really aggressive, maybe anaerobic training, then you could lean more on the functional side. Not that you can't do it over there again. And then the goal, if the goal is to get healthy, if you're trying to overcome a disease, reduce inflammation, restore your hormones, 100% functional is the way to go. Macros do not take into account the medical complexity of a person in a flat set of numbers, right? So to be way more accurate, you're going to want to use functional dieting systems, types of foods, things like that, leaning towards that, maybe preset meal plans. And again, you could track macros functionally too. We do that in Nutrition Dynamic. But in the delivery to an individual, a functional ends up being the key there. Now, again, for Nutrition Dynamic, for example, a lot of my programs, I'll start functional. I give them diet systems. I'm focused on micronutrients, phytonutrients, all these components, which I'll talk about in the next video on what you focus on in a functional dieting system. And then after their body's primed and ready and we're training more and the goal becomes more physique enhancement, now I'm coming over into the macro camp, and I've got to teach them how to be successful using macros, because ultimately macros, I think, is the easiest, most user-friendly way to physically get somewhere faster. In physique enhancement, I think macros really set the tone and become more important, and so the emphasis should be on that. So again, you got two different camps, and what's happening here is it's the research. Most research in macroing, you're going to find, has everything to do with young, healthy males training anaerobically 3 to 4 times a week, right? Most research on like blood sugar dieting, you have keto performance now too, but think of Mediterranean dieting, think of high fiber dieting. Most of that is going to be looking at cholesterol and glucose and fat loss and reductions in blood markers, and that camp always ends up doing best over in functional. So that's where you get stuck, like, well, wait a minute, how many times am I supposed to eat a week? Or excuse me, how many times am I supposed to eat a day, right? And what food should I eat? If you talk to these two different camps, you're going to get two different answers. Macros say if it fits, it ships, eat whatever. Functional says just eat these foods in these amounts throughout the day. And you, the consumer, are going to get a little confused about that. And it's not that either camp's wrong. It's just that what are you doing now for your body? What is the goal? And then where do you functionally sit? Are you more in the unhealthy population, right? Inflamed population? Or are you really healthy and ready to just activate your physical performance? That kind of dictates what camp you fall in, at least at first, and then from there you can move on to the other program. I hope this helps.